Okay, so let's dive in. Picture this. Jabesh-gilead, a city completely surrounded, and they're facing this demand from Nahash the Ammonite that just makes your skin crawl.
Yeah, it's truly horrific. He wants to gouge out every single right eye.
And our source highlights, and this isn't just, random cruelty, it's got a purpose, a really grim one.
Right. He wants to turn these people into, like, crippled but compliant tax collectors. And maybe even more, to slap this permanent shame or reproach onto all of Israel.
And Nahash, he's arrogant about it, gives him only 7 days. He figures no way can Israel get an army together that fast. Just impossible.
He completely underestimated them.
Yeah.
It's a really chilling way to start the chapter, isn't it? The calculation behind the brutality.
Totally. So that's our focus today, 1 Samuel chapter 11. We're digging into this story, but through a really specific lens.
Yeah, we're looking at it based on the interpretation in Ariel Lewis's work, The Vindication of the King. That's the source material we're working from.
And Lewis's reading, it really looks for these deeper layers, right? Prophecy, hidden meanings woven into the narrative, stuff you might miss otherwise.
Exactly. It suggests there's a lot more going on beneath the surface of this historical account.
So our mission for this deep dive, it's to pull out those potent details, those sometimes frankly surprising insights that Ariel Louis finds in this chapter. We're sticking just to the source material provided.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, to understanding what Lewis argues is really happening in this key moment for Israel.
Okay, so the clock's ticking in the story. They get the 7-day truce, and messengers from Jabesh-gilead head out fast.
Right. And according to the source, 2 days later, they arrive in Gibeah, which significantly is Saul's hometown.
And when they tell the people in Gibeah what's happening back in Jabesh, I mean, the reaction is just overwhelming grief.
Yeah, the text says they just lifted up their voices and wept. A whole town just weeping, helplessness,
And right into that scene, that's when Saul shows up.
Yeah, Saul, just walking in from the fields, apparently with his oxen. Routine day for him, until this.
He sees the weeping, asks what's going on. They tell him the news from Jabesh. And this is where Ariel Louis, in our source, brings in a really key insight.
Lewis says Saul's reaction isn't just like general outrage for fellow Israelites. It's much more personal.
Personal? How so?
Well, Lewis highlights this specific connection. Saul and the people of Jabesh-gilead. They were both survivors, or connected to survivors, from the tribe of Benjamin.
Ah, okay. From the whole terrible incident earlier, the Battle of Gibeah, that civil war.
Exactly, that dark part of Israel's past. The source points out that in the aftermath of that conflict, where the other tribes nearly wiped out Benjamin,
right,
Jabesh-gilead had actually sheltered some of the Benjaminite survivors when others wouldn't.
Ah, so there's this deep historical tribal link. Saul, a Benjaminite himself, hears that these specific people, his kin who helped his tribe survive, are facing annihilation.
Yes, it awakened something fierce in him. It's not just national duty, it's tribal loyalty, family pride almost, a shared trauma and a shared bond.
And the source explicitly connects that feeling, that awakening of family pride, to what happens next, doesn't it?
It does. It says the Spirit of God comes mightily upon him because of this, and his anger is kindled greatly. So the divine intervention is tied directly to this very personal tribal connection.
Wow, okay. That really reframes his motivation. It's not just abstract leadership, it's deeply personal.
It roots his call to action in something very powerful and specific.
So, fueled by this divine spirit, this righteous anger, Saul does something pretty dramatic.
Oh, yeah. He takes a yoke of oxen, maybe the ones he just brought in, cuts them into 12 pieces.
Gruesome. And then
sends these pieces throughout all the territory of Israel with a message, a stark one.
Basically, show up and follow me in Samuel, or this is what happens to your oxen. A powerful, if brutal, motivator.
Definitely. But here's another surprising detail Ariel Louis brings out from the source material. How did these pieces, this message, get across all of Israel so fast? We're talking maybe 3 days left at this point.
Yeah, logistically, that seems impossible for regular messengers on foot or horseback.
Exactly. So, according to Lewis's reading of the source, these weren't ordinary human messengers.
Okay.
What were they then?
The source suggests they were supernatural messengers. Angelic beings? Maybe? Capable of covering that vast distance with, supernatural speed.
Angelic beings delivering hacked-up oxen parts as a call to war. Okay, that's quite an image.
It certainly explains the speed and the impact.
And speaking of impact, this is where, according to Ariel Louis in our source, things get really profound. When these pieces arrive, delivered by these supernatural means, something comes over the people. The Bible calls it the dread of the Lord. Yes, and this is probably the most fascinating interpretation Lewis offers from the source. He argues this dread of the Lord, or fear of Yahovah, as the source notes the Hebrew. It's way more than just being scared or reverent.
More than fear. What is it then?
The source describes it as a kind of spiritual ecstasy, a direct, overwhelming, tangible experience of God himself.
Whoa. A direct divine encounter for the whole nation.
Seemingly, yes. And the source gets incredibly specific about the effects. It talks about actual physical changes.
Physical? Like what?
It claims this experience chemically alters the body, even down to the DNA in the bone marrow. It's quite a claim.
Chemically alters DNA? That's wild.
And spiritually?
Spiritually, it's described as causing the soul to, like, return from a state almost like near death.
Okay.
But returning with this burning, intense awareness of immortality, like you've touched eternity and come back changed.
So this dread isn't just awe. It's a profound transformative event, physically and spiritually rewiring people through a direct hit of the divine. That's the idea presented in the source. And Lewis emphasizes the rarity of that specific Hebrew phrase, fear of Yahovah.
How rare.
He points out it only appears twice in the entire Hebrew Bible in exactly that form. And he argues both times it's linked to a Messianic revelation.
Suggesting this event wasn't just about rescuing Jabesh, but had deeper, maybe even prophetic significance.
That's the implication Lewis draws from the source, yes. A national spiritual ecstasy linked to Messianic themes.
Incredible. So what's the immediate result of this? This national transformation, this dread of the Lord?
The source is very clear. This spiritual power, this divine impetus, caused the people to assemble instantly, simultaneously, supernaturally.
Not like a normal army call-up then. No recruiters, no travel time, no supply chains.
None of that. The source says they came out as one man, already equipped for battle. It bypasses all the usual logistics. Just boom, they're there.
So it wasn't just efficient. It was miraculous. A divinely compelled, instantaneous, unified gathering.
Lewis, in our source, actually calls it the fastest military assembly in known history, directly caused by this supernatural experience.
The internal transformation leading directly to the external mobilization. Amazing. Okay, so now they're assembled. By day 4, Saul counts them at a place called Besak.
Right. And the numbers are given: 300,000 men from Israel and 30,000 from Judah.
30,000 from Judah. That seems a bit low compared to the 300,000 from the other tribes. Does Lewis comment on that?
He does. Based on the source, he suggests the lower number from Judah was due to some internal politics, pressure from their tribal leaders.
They were maybe hesitant to fully merge under Saul's leadership, wanting to keep Judah separate.
That's the interpretation offered. A bit of resistance to full unity, even amidst this supernatural event apparently coming from Judah's leadership.
Interesting. But still, the main force is huge and assembled impossibly fast. So what's the next step?
They send a message back to Jabesh-gilead. Good news, finally.
What's the message?
Simple and powerful. Hold on. By the time the sun is hot tomorrow, you will have deliverance.
Wow. Imagine hearing that after facing the eye-gouging threat. Those messengers must have flown back.
They reached Jabesh on the 6th day, according to the timeline, just under the wire. Gave the men inside just enough hope.
Enough hope to maybe bluff the Ammonites.
Exactly. They tell Nash, okay, tomorrow we'll come out to you, buying that crucial time.
And then, that next morning, day 7,
Saul makes his move. He divides this huge, supernaturally gathered force into 3 companies. Attacks the Ammonite camp during the morning watch that's, just before dawn.
Okay, so a surprise attack. But what was the nature of this victory, according to Lewis's reading? Was it brilliant tactics? Superior weaponry?
Lewis really emphasizes, based on the source, that it wasn't about conventional military strength or strategy. Remember who these people were?
Right, mostly villagers, not trained soldiers. They just sort of appeared.
Exactly. Lewis suggests they were villagers, perhaps using improvised weapons, but fired up with this spiritual intuition, this prophetic clarity from their dread of the Lord experience.
So it wasn't tactics that beat the Ammonites?
Not primarily. The source suggests the Ammonites, likely a smaller force, and definitely not expecting this massive army appearing out of nowhere, were simply routed by sheer terror.
Terror?
Absolute terror. The shock, the overwhelming numbers, the impossible speed of Israel's assembly, it just broke them. The victory came from the panic induced by the supernatural event, more than military prowess.
So the spiritual experience directly led to the enemy's psychological collapse.
That's the picture Lewis paints from the source. The dread of the Lord that mobilized Israel also terrified their enemies.
Okay. So Jabesh is saved, incredible deliverance. What happens immediately after? The people must be ecstatic and totally behind Saul now.
Oh, absolutely. They're fired up. And they immediately want revenge, not just on the Ammonites, but on those within Israel who had initially doubted Saul.
Ah, the dissenters from before, anyone specific.
The source suggests they were particularly targeting the leaders of Judah, the ones who'd pushed for separation. They demand Saul put them to death.
And what does Saul do? This is a key moment for him as a leader.
It is. And his response, as the source highlights, is crucial. He absolutely refuses. He says, "Not a man shall be put to death this day." Why?
Because?
For today, the Lord has wrought deliverance in Israel. He gives all the credit to God. No score settling, just acknowledging the divine victory.
That's pretty magnanimous.
Yeah.
Shifting focus back to God. And then Samuel steps in.
Yes. Samuel directs everyone, "Come, let us go to Gilgal, and there renew the kingdom."
Renew the kingdom. What does that entail, according to the source?
Lewis notes they went to Gilgal, and there they sort of officially made Saul king again. But this time, the text stresses, it was before the Lord.
Ah, before the Lord. That sounds more official, more sacred than the first time, like a divine ratification.
Exactly. A public religious confirmation of his kingship. They offered peace sacrifices, and the source says Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. It solidifies his position through divine endorsement and national celebration.
What a journey through just one chapter. So recapping this deep dive, guided by Ariel Lewis's interpretation in the Vindication of the King.
Yeah, we've seen Saul's motivation tied deeply to that Benjamite tribal loyalty.
The idea of supernatural messengers delivering that call to arms.
And this really profound concept of the dread of the Lord, not just fear, but a physically and spiritually transformative ecstasy.
Right, an experience that chemically changes people, connects to Messianic revelation, and leads to that impossibly fast supernatural assembly.
Which in turn led to a victory based not on strategy, but on the sheer terror inspired by this divinely mustered force.
It definitely shows how focusing on the source material, like Lewis does, can uncover layers of potential meaning, prophecy, purpose that you might otherwise skim over.
So much bolder, more revelatory reading of a familiar story.
For sure. It adds dimensions. So as we finish up this exploration, here's something for you, our listeners, to think about based only on what the source material we discussed claims. What does that really specific description, the dread of the Lord, causing chemical changes, impacting DNA, bringing the soul back from near death with this awareness of immortality, what might that suggest about the actual, tangible, physical and spiritual nature of a direct, overwhelming encounter with the divine? Something to mull over.
Definitely something to think about.
Hmm.
Until our next deep dive.